For centuries, there has been no such conflict. The division of the former British Mandate of Palestine and the creation of the State of Israel after the end of the Second World War has been at the heart of Middle Eastern conflicts for the past 60 years. Still, no solution has yet been accepted from both sides. But why? I'm here today in order to unfold the content of this complicated conflict and to show you the real, deep reasons behind its existence. But first, we must travel to the early and mid-20th century. The not-so-far history of this conflict, which built it up to the harsh situation it faces today, started at the first section of the 20th century. Slowly, as the Jewish people were driven out of Europe, especially during World War II, they started to migrate. The Zionists, people who are extremely towards Israel, were looking for a homeland for the Jews. And after looking both in Africa and America, they started to immigrate into Palestine. At the beginning, there was no problem with the Jews migrating into Palestine. But as their numbers were vastly growing, problems started to occur. The Jewish people arrived looking for a safe place to live in, and slowly started to express the feelings of wanting to turn Palestine into Israel, the land they once called home. Then, perhaps finally, with the end of the Second World War and the brutal murder of 6 million Jews, the world finally understood that the Jewish people must have their own country, a place they could live in with no fear. In 1947, the UN finally intervened, and because of the Holocaust and many other past events, with 33 votes for and 13 against, they divided Palestine into two countries, Israel and Palestine. Israel took 55% of the space, while Palestine consisted of only 45% of it. They did it even though the Jews were only 30% of the total population and owned only 7% of the land, mainly because their Arabs would not sell it to them. Finally, the Jewish people had a safe place, protection, and the desired country they needed. But all of this didn't come just like that. The Palestinians were extremely unhappy, and the beginning of what is the world's most known conflict truly began. Quickly and predictably, Israel's war for independence began. The war was fought from the borders of Lebanon on the east all the way to Eilat at the very south of Israel. Over 8,000 people died and 15,000 were wounded. In total, over 1% of the Jewish community died in the deadliest war between the Israelis and the Arabs. Israel had to face 5 Arab armies in that war. In the north, they fought Lebanon and Syria. In the east, Iraq and Jordan, and in the south, Egypt. In addition, Palestine and other Arabs volunteered to join the war against Israel. Between 29th of November 1947 to the 1st of April 1948, the first phase of the war happened, in which the Palestinian Arabs took the offensive with the help of their neighboring countries, leaving the Israelis with little success and with them almost reaching their goal. However, in the next 6 weeks, the Haganah, the Jewish defense force created by David Ben-Gurion, the first Israeli prime minister, turned the tables around and took over much land. As the war continued, the Haganah changed its name to the Israel Defense Force, which is Israel's military today. Israel kept on holding the Arab forces back, and in the end, all the Arab countries signed an armistice agreements with Israel. In the end, Israel did not only hold the Arab forces back, but also captured over 5,000 kilometers squared of land outside the area given to Israel by the UN, causing much rightful anger from the Arab community. Over 100,000 men and women joined the IDF, or the Israel Defense Force, and Israel's presence was growing while the Palestinian one was disappearing, which we can almost clearly see today. And the hatred between the two communities just kept on peaking. The next big war was the Six-Day War, which was fought between the 5th of June 1967 till the 10th of June 1967. In this war, Israel played as a defensive force as it found itself surrounded
by sudden attacks from all the Arab countries around them. The war was mostly fought between Israel and Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. After the Suez Crisis, the UN has established a presence in the Middle East, especially in its sensitive borders. The Egyptians didn't want the UN in the Suez borders after a while, and in May 1967 started to move forces into the Suez areas to push the UN away according to their wants. However, Israel saw it as a preparation for an invasion. They also closed the Gulf of Aqaba for Israeli ships. Israel didn't wait to get attacked and launched a huge military campaign against its enemies, which ended up being very successful military-wise but angered the Arabs. By June 5th, most of the air force of Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria were destroyed, and by June 7th, much of their tanks were eliminated. Throughout this quick war, Israel moved into the Sinai Desert and the Suez Canal, as well as 30 miles into Syria, and captured those areas. This was the most successful war from the Israeli perspective and the worst for the Arab world. The huge success of that war gave a lot of morale to Israel. However, it also brought a lot of trouble with it, as now they had 600,000 Arabs who lived in the West Bank under Israeli control. This caused a lot of Arabs to join the PLO, or the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and caused the domestic policies to be much more complicated.
From then on, there had been many other wars, like the Yom Kippur War, which took place in 1973, after constant threats from Egypt, in which 2,688 soldiers died and 7,250 were wounded. The two Lebanon wars in 1982 and 2006, the Israeli-Gaza war, and many more. In between those wars, there had been a few peace treaties signed, like the one between Israel and Egypt, where Israel gave back the Sinai Desert, and between Israel and Jordan. Those peace treaties might have sparked a little bit of hope for peace, but we do not see that today. Overall, the threat of war is always available in the Middle East, and constant attacks, both from terrorists and from armies, take place there, making the situation ever so growing, and the peace talks to keep on failing. However, the full history of wars between those two communities are not the only reason for the hatred and the conflict between them, which is where religion and culture come in.
Thousands of years ago, according to historical fact, the Jews controlled Israel, which was, according to the Torah, the Jewish Bible, was given to them by God. The Christian Roman Empire took over and turned it into a Christian state, which forced the Jews to turn into Christians or get exiled. Then, the Muslims took over the land in 630 AD and seized power over it again in 1923, controlling it until May 14, 1948. Religion-wise, both the Jews and the Arabs hold Jerusalem holy, but different parts of it. The Jewish religion hold most of the western parts and some of the eastern parts important, and the Muslims hold the other parts of the eastern city holy. Therefore, we can see that the beliefs of both sides hold the land important, and therefore none of them will give up certain areas. On the other hand, two very different cultures have been built over hundreds of years within the Jewish and the Palestinian communities. On one hand, the Jews came from all over the world, especially Europe, making them more organized, have smaller families, and view the way a country should run differently. In addition, a mix of Judaism is instilled in this culture, which creates humbleness and connection between the Israelis. On the other hand, the Palestinian culture is based on Middle Eastern culture, which is more keeping information for themselves, have a large family, which the wife takes care of the kids, and have different healthcare beliefs like wearing an omelet to keep them healthy.
Those cultural differences make it even more difficult for the Israelis and Palestinians to share the same land. The disagreements on the basic aspects of life create a barrier that is almost impossible to overcome. leading me to the reality of how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict looks like today. Today, after the many years those two nations lived together in the same area, conflict about land, dominance, and culture occurred.
Firstly, the settlements in the Western Bank are one of the main conflict points that must be solved. Throughout the years, the Israelis started to build settlements inside the Western Bank, the area which was given to Palestine by the UN. However, the UN agreement didn't reference the settlements. The growing amount of settlements doesn't give the Palestinians much room to grow and develop in, and keeps them much under Israeli bay. Naturally, it takes away from the freedom of the Palestinians, but in Israel's perspective, it keeps out terror groups, which it has and still does suffer from. Thus, the settlements are positive for Israel's safety, but decrease the life quality of the Palestinians in the Western Bank. Secondly, there are two main political parties in the Palestinian community, the Fatah and the Hamas. The Fatah is more peaceful towards Israel. For example, it signed the Oslo agreements, which brought both sides a step closer to peace. However, the Hamas is more extreme and does not recognize the state of Israel. Today, the Hamas has much power, especially in Gaza, and is in deep conflict with Israel, making the peace talks much harsher and much harder to occur and to come to agreements. Lastly, even though there are talks of possible peace within the countries, ongoing attacks happen weekly, whether it is from the Israeli army or from Arab terrorist groups. Those attacks not only injure the relationship of the two nations, but also kill innocent people, making the lives in the specific area tougher and more dangerous. Also, the hatred among the groups interferes even with the peace acts. For example, Israel gave away the Gaza Strip to the Palestinians in order to develop peace, and both sides had positive interactions. However, the Hamas took over the area, and it is currently used to bomb Israel, and all the citizens that live in the area have a horrible life with little food, water, or money. The reality does not look positive.
Ever since the creation of Israel, the Middle East has been in constant state of warfare. So how do we solve such a complicated situation? Throughout the years, the media has painted a bloody, horrific picture of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, showing constant images of blood, terror, and death, and leaving behind the beauty of those two nations and the real, depthly reason for their situation. So how will the public ever grasp enough knowledge and support the cause? Hopefully, you now understand how deep the situation really is, and that in order to solve it, we must first unfold and create solutions for most differences. The religion, lifestyle, political life, and many other aspects are unalike, and we must overcome those differences to bring peace to the Middle East. Today, the UN, the US, and many other empires are involved in this peace process and are trying to achieve this goal of peace. And you, as a single individual, can help them achieve their goal. Keep being informed, inform your friends, and care. Only like this, with the support of the whole world, will peace actually be achieved. You have the chance to solve the most brutal conflict of our time.